Um, Good morning, Teresa Colson. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Indiana Partners for Sustainability fourth quarter meeting. Just a reminder to keep your microphone camera turned off and use the chat feature or unmute your microphone when you have Q&A, different things. We have Caitlin Carroll. She's our new Pollution Prevention Sustainability Program Manager. She is doing all the behind the scene things. We'll take care of what you need for her. We're happy to welcome her. She started in this role November 11th. So it's a very important agency role for managing our longstanding pollution for prevention programs, which is now Partners for Sustainability and the Environmental Stewardship Program, which many of us are familiar or members of. Caitlin joined the OPS in May of 2023 as a special projects manager and took on several important responsibilities, most notably the Governor's Award for Environmental Excellence. She also stepped in to assist in last minute organization for our partners annual conference in this last quarter. But I wanted to make sure to introduce her. She comes to us with a degree from Ball State in natural resources and environmental management, and has worked in a variety of challenging state park positions before coming to OPS. So we're very happy to have you. I wanted to give an introduction for her. And Caitlin?
Yep. Thank you, Teresa. I'm excited to be working with the partners and looking forward to today's speakers.
Okay. So I'd like to, our first order for our first speaker, good morning, is Renee Stewart. Welcome. And she is going to talk with us about grants for small business manufacturing in Indiana. Renee Stewart is the Senior Executive Director of the Purdue University Manufacturing Extension Partnership, the MEP. For over a decade, Renee has been an integral member of the center, contributing to the organization's success as one of the highest performing MEP centers in the nation. Since joining Purdue MEP, Renee has held several roles in the organization, allowing her to play a pivotal role in driving major milestones, particularly in areas of workforce development, strategic partnership, advocacy, and marketing. I'd like to welcome Renee.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Teresa. And thank you for that slightly delayed start this morning and allowed me to refill my coffee. So that was perfect. Appreciate that. Also, so glad to be here with you all this morning to talk a little bit about this unique opportunity. Can you not hear me? I saw a chat.
Yeah, no, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I just saw someone say perform a mic speaker check. Just want to make sure everyone could hear me. So let me go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. So briefly, I do want to talk a little bit about our organization for those of you that are not familiar with the Purdue University Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We work with primarily small to mid-sized manufacturers throughout the state in a variety of capacities. But these are our four main pillars that we frequently point to in terms of how we're helping manufacturers across the state. And ultimately what we're trying to do is help our state's manufacturers be more globally competitive. And we do that in a variety of different ways. So first and foremost, continuous improvement has been one of our areas of service for quite some time. That encompasses items such as helping manufacturers with quality management systems, lean manufacturing implementation, and Six Sigma certifications. In recent years, we have added on to those core services to get into supply chain technology and workforce development. In terms of workforce, that's not only helping upskill current incumbent workers on site with manufacturers, but it's also helping with pipeline building. So working with unemployed, underemployed individuals. We also have a very robust second chance program where we will go on site with state and county correctional facilities and provide individuals getting ready to re-enter with skills to be prepared for a possible career in manufacturing. That specific program has trained about 2,000 people since we launched it a few years ago. And it's been so successful that it's been replicated in other states. Supply chain, I'm sure we all are familiar with the issues that come up when there's any types of break in the supply chain, as we saw during the COVID pandemic. So working with companies for supply chain resiliency, supply chain risk, and then last but not least, technology and innovation, which this is helping manufacturers identify potential cost-effective solutions in the Industry 4.0 space. So whether that's cybersecurity, automation, ERP, AI, we work with companies alongside there. And we're typically on site with around 800 manufacturers a year. So that's just a little bit about what we do day in and day out. Why I'm here specifically today is to talk about this very unique opportunity that's been presented to us by the Department of Energy. And before I get into the details here, I want to commend DOE for this because it's really a very proactive approach to helping companies pivot to electric vehicles and clean energy opportunities. There were only 3 states that were actually selected for this opportunity, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana. So who is involved? As I mentioned, DOE is the funding mechanism for this, specifically through EnergyWorks. And then here locally, Purdue MEP is partnering with Connexus Indiana to work on this initiative. As I mentioned, there were only 3 states selected. And as you can note here, Indiana, obviously just behind Michigan in terms of being one of the biggest states in terms of automotive production. So very manufacturing intensive here, particularly when it comes to the automotive sector. When we will be launching our first go around of review of this playbook in January. And what is this? So this playbook is really designed to help manufacturers get an actionable plan to adapt their operations to support electric vehicles production as well as clean energy industries. And that's being done by a technical, financial, and strategic guidance that is outlined in this playbook. So let's talk a little bit more about the playbook. It was developed by the Argonne Laboratory in Illinois. And what we're really seeking to do here initially is to go on site with manufacturers and walk through this playbook with them and get insights into what resonates with them, what maybe they've tried, what they haven't tried, what's feasible. And here are the kind of the core items that are covered in the playbook. So first and foremost, what are the current automotive trends? What's happening in the sector right now? Where are the opportunities? Where are the challenges? And then that moves into how can you capitalize on areas outside of just the traditional internal combustion engine type of automobiles that are being produced. Then it gets very specific into steps. So what are the steps as a manufacturer that you could follow to generate potential new business in other industries? And then a path to executing that strategy. One of the things that I think is unique about this playbook that's been put together is it's not just a roadmap, but it's also a resource guide. So for those of you that have manufacturing experience or with the manufacturers, they do not know all of the resources that are out there in terms of funding possibilities, in terms of programs and support. So this guide, this playbook, actually includes some of those areas that would be applicable to a small manufacturer that is looking to diversify the industries that it serves. One of the areas that's also covered in the playbook, this is what's really important, are the manufacturers that are affected. And not just those that are affected negatively, but who are the ones that could be affected positively? Where are we going to see an upswing in production with this shift to more electric vehicles and hybrids that are being produced? So that's captured on the left-hand side. The middle, that's really the manufacturers that aren't going to be impacted one way or another. But where we're really looking to hone in is this category on the right. So these are the manufacturers that are going to be negatively impacted on this shift away from the internal combustion engines toward electric vehicles and hybrids. So with this proactive approach that the Department of Energy is taking, it allows us to get ahead of the curve and work with these companies to diversify their client mix, so they're prepared when the industry in the traditional automotive sector does, see a dip in production. So next steps, why am I here? What are we looking for? As I mentioned, the playbook is it is in draft format right now, but we're really looking to get feedback from companies that are affected. So the manufacturers that would be encompassed in this list right here. We have 3 rounds of feedback that we will be going through with 3 sets of unique companies. As I mentioned, we are launching the first go around in January and have already identified companies that will be participating in that portion. What's in it for those companies, right? They get a chance to get the copy of that playbook in advance. They get an opportunity to have Purdue MEP on site with them, talking about the possibilities that are available to them as a company. And then they obviously will provide feedback to us that could impact the draft of the playbook as it stands. So the tentative schedule is there will be a cohort reviewing the playbook January to March. Then we will be implementing changes. Then we'll go to the next cohort of companies in April. And then they will also have 2 months for review. And then we'll have the third cohort in the fall. The most important piece of all of this, in addition to the Department of Energy putting together this playbook and this proactive approach, there is actually funding that is coming to the state to help implement projects identified from this work that we're doing. So the companies that are taking place in these cohorts are going to have a little bit of a competitive advantage when it comes to applying for those funds from the state to actually invest in these types of projects. And I believe the funding that the state would be receiving is around $8 million to help with the implementation of these projects. So I realize that's a lot of information that I've thrown at each of you this morning. I'm happy to address any questions. I've also put my contact information up here if anybody wants to reach out to me directly. If you have manufacturers in mind, please feel free to connect me to them. If you have questions about this opportunity, I encourage you to ask now or also reach out to me individually. I see in the, that's a great question, Amber. Amber asked in the chat if the participating companies will be made publicly available. That will be up to the companies if they want to disclose their participation in the initiative. It is not a requirement of the Department of Energy that we release that, but I anticipate that there will be success stories that will be coming out of this. And in that case, certainly the company name will be made public. Thank you for that question, Amber. Any other questions? Again, like I said, here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. I will be on the meeting a little bit longer, so feel free to add any other additional questions. Let's see, Amber has another question. Has it determined what projects the state funding can fund? So that announcement has not yet been made. The application for that funding was just recently submitted, I believe, at the end of October. But the funding is specifically for these types of projects. So it's for companies that are negatively impacted from this shift that are looking to diversify their client mix. So that's as specific as I can get right now in terms of what those parameters will look like. But it is intentionally kind of a 1-2 funding mix with releasing the playbook, getting feedback, identifying companies, and then coming through with the actual implementation of those projects. Great questions. A very excellent question, Mallory. Mallory asks if the change in administration will affect the funding opportunities or the program more generally. So the good news is since the funding has already been authorized and allocated, the program will not be, this specifically what we're talking about today, will not be negatively impacted because those dollars have already been committed and accounted for. The anticipated total outcome of all of this was to take what we learned in Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan and roll that out nationwide. That obviously is up in the air as a question because those dollars have not been allocated. But what we're doing here in Indiana is safe and would not face any potential cuts due to the administration change. All great questions. Will the playbook be available once it's completed? Yes. Once the playbook is in final form, it will be made a public to anyone. We'll likely be doing some educational events around it, webinars, and possibly even some half-day workshopping with companies on site. So that would be probably more like a year from now, we would be looking like something like that, because that's around when we hope to have the playbook finalized. Well, thank you so much for having me here this morning. It was great talking to all of you, and I look forward to any additional questions that come my way. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Renee. I will share that our presentations will be uploaded to the webpage soon for that, so we can see through there. I did have one question. Will there be a webpage or a way to see kind of the progress or what the final grants were for these?
That is an excellent question. So in terms of this initial go around, once the playbook is finalized and we have results for that, we will be sending out information, not just on this, but then on the second part of that follow-up for the actual implementation. So that's a great question. I should also mention, we do have on our website, we do have a web page. It's too long for me to ramble through here, but I'll put it in the chat. So if you know a company that would fit this, you can send them that webpage directly and they can go in and enter their information for consideration. You can also email me the companies as well, but that might be something that could be helpful for me to provide for anyone that may know of companies that would qualify for this. Thank you.
Renee, we had another question come in. Is this program for only existing facilities, or can this be used on newly established facilities?
That's a great question. At least, so what we're doing right now, it's really to ensure that we don't lose any businesses. The last thing we want to see are any manufacturers closing up shop because they are solely reliant on supplying the internal combustion engine industry. So we're really trying to connect with existing manufacturers here However, I will say if there is an entity that you feel would benefit from seeing the playbook, I'd be happy to see if we could give them a draft of it to help them get started. DOE has been amazing. They've been very flexible with this. So I think they would be open to it. It just wouldn't be going through the formal process with them in terms of, like I said, we're really trying to look at those that are established and looking to pivot to a different market. However, be happy to talk with a company that's looking to start up and get into providing clean energy or EV industries. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. It was great speaking with you this morning.
Thank you, Renee. We really appreciate your time and the questions for those. Looks like we're a little early. We weren't sure how much Q&A that we would have on those questions. If you think of additional questions, put those in the chat. We'll make sure we'll get those to Renee and get answers back for us. I think just being a little bit ahead of time, we can go to a break early and have a little bit of extra time, but then be back by the 9:45 for that. During the break, we'll have up the slide for the Governor's Award. It's that season to start preparing those, nominate those for the good work that's been done on there. So that QR code's up from Caitlin. Thank you. And we'll see everybody back at 9:45. Good morning. I want to welcome everybody back from break. I want to remind everybody to just keep your microphone and camera turned off and use the chat feature. I think that worked really well in the earlier session. And thanks for your flexibility with kind of an extended break time. Hopefully you had either some relaxing or some power time to get that for there. Next for our presentation is Jennifer Collins with NCAMP and Adam Estes with NCAMP. They're going to have a presentation on leading the transition from reactive to proactive environmental compliance. Wanted to just a quick on bio for Jennifer. She's been in the over 25 years of public service and now as a technical program manager at NCAMP. Solid foundation in air regulations, permits, and her career is highlighted in her adeptness in mastering technology, exceptional leadership, and her ability to maintain professionalism in high pressure situations. Her role at NCAMP capitalizes on her extensive regulatory knowledge, particularly in air, RCRA, EPCRA, and other environmental regulations to support complex reporting needs of several large customers. I also want to introduce Adam Estes as well. And Adam started his environmental journey in 2007 with the City of Indianapolis as an air inspector. From there, Adam helped close the Newport, Indiana Chemical Depot and entered environmental consulting, where he's managed multiple O&G and railroad clients with compliance in their air waste requirements. Prior to NCAMP, Adam was the corporate senior environmental specialist for North Installation, where he oversaw improving and maintaining the company's environmental management program and served as the SME for the company on all environmental regulations. So I want to welcome both of them, and we'll get the slides pulled up and hear about their wonderful presentation. I think it's been a day with some technical things, so we appreciate everybody's patience on this.
I'll give it up, Jennifer and Adam.
Okay.
Yeah,
that looks much better.
Great. Thank
you.
I appreciate it. Welcome everybody, and great to be back here with the partners, and thanks for the invitation today. Adam and I are from NCAMP, as Teresa said, and we would like to talk today about leading the transition, moving from reactive to proactive environmental compliance. And I am Jen Collins, and some of you may know me from previous interactions at IDEM. And since she gave our bios, I won't go too far in depth. Adam, anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I agree. We already got the bios, so just hi, everyone.
Okay. Next. All right, next slide. So just a tad bit about NCAMP. NCAMP is, our goal is to help you utilize the data that you are managing day to day in a more efficient way. You've probably got a million different spreadsheets that you're saving all of your compliance data and looking through waste streams and various chemical tracking and all of that. Our goal is to just put that all into a single one-stop shop for you to drive continuum compliance. So that is our goal. And next slide.
All right, so to this audience, we probably don't need a lot of this information, but from NCAMP's perspective, we need to kind of set the stage on what environmental compliance means so that when we get to the more happier parts of the presentation that Jen's going to give, we know what she's referring to. So from NCAMP's perspective, we're going to kind of separate environmental compliance from the legal requirements and then more of the moral public perspective. So on the legal side, we got by no means an all-inclusive list, but these 8 very large environmental laws that govern everything regarding what we are approved to construct and operate to discharge pollutants to air and water, what constitutes a hazardous waste and how do we management, approvals for our chemicals and usage with those chemicals. And this is typically where a lot of their reactivity comes from because these are very, very complex regs. And even if you are one of those very lucky individuals who I envy that finds them simple, they have a lot of requirements that need to be done. So consider this kind of the floor, the bare minimum of what needs to be met on environmental compliance. And Jen's going to get into the strategies to how to get out of that reactive compliance. On the other side of it with the public, it gets a little more convoluted because we introduce moral values and political viewpoints. But kind of as an overview, where there's the public is going is always greater transparency, and then there's a growing movement of ESG. But the problem with these kind of two being separated is that most of the public usually does not understand the legal requirements. So you can be a really good environmental steward, fully compliant with everything, but have a perception as being one of the worst violators or just horrible for the environment. And obviously, as we move towards proactive, we want to be in good standing with not just the floor, but also helping with improving the public. And where that comes in is that keyword there of transparency. Obviously, if you don't meet the floor, you lead into fines and closure, possibly criminality, which kind of feeds that public perception cycle. It becomes a vicious positive feedback loop. But where transparency comes in is that you want to make sure that whatever you're saying, you are able to fact check. A lot of people if you're not familiar with the term greenwashing, it's basically when you're doing something that has misleading ramifications of what's green. And you got to help the public understand what your compliance is with these various requirements, as well as what you've done that's above and beyond them, celebrating your successes basically, because that will feed into helping other facilities also move into a more proactive approach. So where you've switched to a greener chemical, if you've installed technology that goes above backed level when you're not required, all of those are things to kind of celebrate and embrace transparency rather than some of the fears that might come around with that. Next slide. So digging into the gloom and doom on the reactive side of things, basically managing that floor of environmental compliance. And it's hopefully with this audience, it's never intentional. It's more just the fact that we're overwhelmed. Most people in this industry are used to being understaffed and overworked. So as part of the move to proactive that Jen's going to go over is making sure that you can identify one, is your company just kind of going through the motions? When you get a violation or some kind of citation, do you respond with a piece of paper that says, look, I'm good, don't look any further? Or do you establish a program that has actionable items that identify the issue, prevent it from happening, and then allow you to kind of move forward so that it doesn't happen again and can sustain when you're not there? Some of these case studies probably are familiar to a lot of people in this audience. But basically, when you have an audit and you find things that are completely opposite of what all of the record keeping that you've been taking shows. That first one on the screen, classic case of either individuals not aware of what they need to be inspecting or just pencil whipping the forms. And at best, when the forms are pencil whipped, you're setting yourself up for failure. And at worst, you're building a case for willful and knowingly and negligent. 3 words you never want to be experiencing in the environmental sector. So that's one of the things you want to look for is, do we do what we say we do? The other 2 items are, in the case studies here, are when you have good record keeping, but there's either not an understanding of what that's supposed to mean, or there's no procedure to trigger what it's going to do. So in this case, you're tracking what you need to be doing, but you just basically document your violation or deviation. You don't actually stop yourself from having some kind of exceedance, or you let things come in the door that open you up to new regulations that you weren't prepared for, and now you've already kind of got a violation on your hands. Next slide. All right, so we've kind of broken down, and in Jen's slides, you'll see how to get over these, but we've put all of the barriers into 5 categories from left to right, the most common to the most insidious. So as we already kind of mentioned, it's very, very common that you have resource constraints, whether it's staff, money, software, or time. This is the most difficult hurdle to overcome, in my opinion, because it's just so frequent and constant. After that one, lack of expertise. We listed just 8 environmental regulations. There's plenty more, and there's state differences. It gets intensive. So it's very difficult to find someone who's a subject matter expert on all the things you need. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who is, usually those individuals don't also have experience in ESG and pollution prevention. So it gets very hard to get a good, robust group of staff. In the middle is where we start to kind of transition from that common to more insidious. Probably a lot of people have experienced this is how we've always done it, or other barriers that I don't want to change what you're telling me to do. And on the worst side of things, a lot of sham recycling, denial, propaganda, misinformation, or the one that makes me rage that I've heard frequently is dilution is the solution to pollution. All of those have kind of created this legacy of facilities having either this isn't doing any good, we're just filling out forms, we're not actually improving the environment, basically hostility to wanting to actually help. If you've overcome those first 3, and we move into more insidious, where we have a group that's all right, we have the money, we have the need, but they bite off more than they can chew, and they set up unrealistic expectations. Additionally, upper management, if they've bought in, they might be the ones that have unrealistic expectations. So you need to make sure that your goals are aspirational. You always want to be improving, but start it off at a much slower pace where you can move where you'll actually succeed at certain milestones. And then last is, it could be really disheartening, would be just you encounter those barriers and you give up. Hopefully that's not that frequent. What I see more common is that you've overcome the barriers and you have a really good team, department, and procedure, things are working, but it turns out that one person is the linchpin for everything that's been built. And once that person leaves, it all falls apart. You need to make sure that once you've overcome the barriers, you got good expectations, you build a system that can outlast yourself, or even if you're there until retirement, new people come in, you want to make sure that your procedures are not just known inside people's heads. They're very well documented and easy to find. And I think now I'm handing it over to Jen to be more sunny.
Next slide. Yeah, so why should we try to have a more proactive environmental compliance? I know that all of you or most of you are Indiana Partners for Sustainability, and some of you may even have gone that next step to join the Indiana Environmental Stewardship Program, where you likely have already implemented environmental management systems and a proactive approach to your compliance obligations. I also know that many of you who don't have environmental management systems in place have environmental compliance programs that are robust, and others may just be starting on that forward movement towards proactive compliance. So we have a variety of folks here in the room today, and I think that we can all agree that environmental compliance is a good thing. We don't want to have the stick, action taken on us, and if we can drive towards a more proactive environmental compliance, why not? And let's go for it. So, so several reasons why the risk reduction component is great. Just by moving to more, even substituting chemicals is reducing risk. Making sure that you are timely submitting reports and timely complying with inspection requests. All of those things are reducing your risk for future violations or even loss of reputation in the future. So also looking for cost savings. Do you want to, have fines? We don't want fines, so avoiding those, but also internally, how can you save money by looking at your operations, making those reductions where possible, and perhaps in the long run, reducing usage or even sending things off-site that you should have used, but now they're waste. So just managing things in a more proactive way will avoid that happening. So enhancing your reputation, making sure that you do what you say you're going to do, as Adam mentioned, is a huge step towards your proactive compliance and that reputation in your own industry and wider to financial institutions and so forth. So you definitely want to make sure that you're looking at all of those aspects. And so we know that folks have environmental management systems which help move along that path. They've engaged workforce and really look strategically at their programs, and also join programs like this or the Environmental Stewardship Program to encourage them, their companies to continue that progress towards proactive compliance. So today next slide, please. I want to take us back to some basics. And next slide, please. Thank you. The proactive approach that I'd like to talk about is the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. And we can thank Deming and his quality control mindset for bringing that to the world way back in the past. And allowing us to just refresh our minds on what this is. For those of you that have really a registered environmental management system, you're doing this constantly, but you may have gotten away from those costly certifications. And so therefore it's kind of, yeah, maybe we're falling off on some piece of this. So I want to remind you about those parts today if you have kind of lost your plan, do, check, act process. And for others that maybe you don't have this mindset with your operations yet, maybe there's just a little tidbit that you can take with you today. I don't expect you to, leave with, a complete plan of action to take you to the next level. But if there's something that sparks your interest or that reminds you, hey, I really wanted to do that, jot it down and make a note for yourself to go back and look at that area of your program. So next slide. So just covering the plan part of this, making sure that you have assessed all your regulatory requirements, ensuring that you've documented, all of your environmental impacts. So looking at, okay, do I have waste streams? Do I have air emissions? Do I have anything else that impacts the environment? Do I have local laws that impact me? Do I have federal laws? What things out there are new that may impact me? We know of some changes related to e-manifest that may impact you. So just being aware of everything that is out there in the world that would impact your business, your industry. And there are many different ways to do that, but we want you to take a look and make sure you have a list of those things, write it down, make sure that it's documented somewhere, because that will be an essential piece to this entire cycle.
And don't hide that document.
Don't hide it, share it widely. Definitely have a conversation internally with not only your environmental team, but the leaders of the company, and making sure that they know what environmental things are impacting your business. Second, conduct environmental risk assessment. So you're looking really at where in those regulatory requirements are there risks to your business? Are you, do you need to, meet a specific deadline? Do you have to have control equipment in place by a certain date? Do you need that stack tested? What other things go along with your regulatory requirements? And do some of them have monetary risk associated or just regulatory risk? So you're looking through all of that. Definitely looking to, number 3, define those objectives and targets related to each of those areas. So as Adam mentioned, you wouldn't want to set up expectations that you couldn't meet. You want to definitely look at what is the most achievable thing that you can do in that area. Let's say you're wanting to reduce your hazardous waste by 10%. That seems like a reasonable goal. Is that expectation real? Could you maybe stretch that a little bit for your internal process to, give yourself a little bit more of a bump towards more compliance? But defining those, what are your goals? And you may have some that come from outside of your group that you have to comply with, a corporate mandate or something external that is a driver as well. Once you have those things, then you'll want to develop those policies and procedures that go along with those programs, making sure that you've documented everything. It's really critical, as Adam mentioned, that you have a systematic way of doing the procedures for your employees. What policies back those things? Why are we doing these procedures? What, making sure that the employees and staff understand what's behind it. So work procedures are important, and you may really want to involve those folks on the floor that are doing the work right now. If you don't already have a procedure in place that they're following, making sure that they are involved and can give you feedback on whether that will be a hindrance to their job or they can make do with what you're asking them to do in order to comply. So we don't want them to avoid those work procedures just because they're hard for them to implement. And then finally, allocating those resources and responsibilities. So who is going to do the work? Making sure you put a name to it and a timeline by which certain things will be accomplished. Make sure that you know specific deadlines within your timeline so that you can meet those goals that you have set for yourself. So next slide. The do part of this is to go ahead and train those employees that you've identified, making sure that they know what the new work procedure is, or ensuring that they have the trainings. For example, if they are handling waste, do they have the appropriate level of training? Do they have training to take air compliance monitoring records? What do they need to know for their specific role in your plan? Also, implementing any operational controls. Do you have things in place that can be an automatic way for something to be recorded? For instance, I've seen companies where they have, the thermal oxidizer is automatically taking readings. So do you have both the automated ways and then the SOPs in place to make sure that when X happens, then Y also happens? For instance, the waste pickup is on a specific day. We need this person to be there at X time, making sure that those type of things are documented as well. Also going back into, everything is documented. Your record keeping for any waste requirements, any air requirements, also chemical usage. It may be something that you're not even thinking about year round. We obviously file a lot of tier 2 reports. We see where companies forget, that they have chemicals in their equipment. So just being aware of where all of your chemicals are stored and making sure you have documentation on that as well. The fourth thing is really critical to engage your vendors and contractors. We don't operate in a silo. We can't operate in a silo when you're managing all of these requirements at your facility. Environmental teams need to rely on other folks, your vendors for your waste hauling. You may have stack testers and other folks that come in, your environmental consultants that are assisting you, but make sure that you're utilizing their skills and asking the questions that you need help with. So if you have an area that you're really hoping to reduce waste in, talking to your vendors, is there a different way to manage the waste? Could it be that I'm sending a whole bunch of hazardous waste? I've created hazardous waste by combining a has and a non-has. Is there a better way to separate out my streams so that I don't have so much to pay for and to manage at the end. So just have those conversations. And then just conducting your routine operations, day-to-day environmental compliance. There are many different things that you need to manage. And this all goes back to that concept of managing things based on importance, not their emergency status, or are they a fire for the day? So if you've done your planning, you should be able to think ahead. What is going to be due? I'm not up against the wire then for a deadline, maybe March 1st deadline. If I've planned ahead and I have all my records and I have everything ready to submit those reports. So this goes back to that. So every day you need to be doing the things that are necessary, but also thinking ahead. Next slide. So this part of the cycle is to go back and look at what you've done. Conducting those regular inspections and audits. You can either do that internally or have someone come in as a third party and audit your business, your plan, and making sure that in those audits, they're checking through all of the things that you said that you were going to do, and those especially the regulatory requirements that you've met your compliance requirements.
I would add, Jen, on those audits, whether they're internal or external, to add hypotheticals as a part of the audit. It's a really good check on your training, because normally people kind of zone out on trainings. So having the ability to ask, okay, everything looks good. What if this were to happen? What would you do? Will help advise or figure out if your staff, who don't have to be environmental experts, at least know that they took away from the training what they needed to.
Excellent point. Yeah, we definitely want to make sure that those are also documented, document your audits, and then monitor those key performance indicators. Are you making reductions in the waste area that you wanted to make? Are you, maybe you've had a spike in a certain area. Make sure to address that. So you're looking at all of those key performance indicators. And then if something looks off related to what you thought you would have at this point in time, going down that rabbit hole to make sure that you've addressed that root issue of where that issue is coming from. And then reviewing incident reports. If you have somewhere that you've had a spill or something else, making sure that those also get looked at for deep knowledge of the process that caused that incident, making sure that you have that documented as well. And then evaluating your compliance trends. So did you have inspections during the year that you either passed or you didn't pass? You have some issues related to the area that the inspector was in, and auditing those as well, looking through and making sure that you've documented the reasoning why those things occurred. And then looking holistically for feedback through not only the internal folks, your leaders, your external folks too, folks that you have dealings with. Maybe your vendors have some feedback that they'd like to provide. How often do we ask our vendors for feedback? I don't know necessarily that folks are asking for feedback, on a routine basis. So go ahead and ask to see if they have any areas they'd like to see improved in the process that they're working with you on. And then next slide. So implement any corrective or preventative actions that go back to your plan. So where in the last check did you find things that were off? And what needs to take place to reevaluate and get those back into your plan? Making sure that you do go back and rewrite a policy or you update a work procedure, um, ensuring that, maybe that person who had a spill, it was because the container was too far away and they couldn't manage the weight of the thing that they had to dump into the drum. Is there some other way to modify that work experience for that person to ensure that they're not having a spill in their work area? Is there anything else with the employee training that they need? Did they understand your work procedures? Do they need additional training? If so, build that back into your plan and then set new goals. Those new goals will be based on whether you met your past goals or you didn't meet them. If you didn't meet them, make sure they are achievable. What is it that's causing us to have a problem in getting to our final result? Did we have, resource complications? Did we have, a change in our process that really caused us to, lose track of the goal? Maybe it doubled your amount of waste instead of reduced it. So was there anything internally that actually didn't get communicated to the upper management or downstream that really needed to be? And so making sure that all of that, and number 5, that you do communicate those results and any changes that need to be made to your holistic plan to all parties involved. So document, communicate, and act on it, and go back through the cycle again. Next slide.
So kind of as a pro tip, and spoiler, as Jen and I are employees of a software solutions company, we're a bit biased, but the more you can utilize digital solutions, the easier it is to transition to proactive. Jen and I being former regulators, and I think everyone in environmental, if you're not in love with Excel, you become very proficient with it. I do love Excel, but at the same time, its strengths are the fact that it's everywhere, it's familiar, but you end up having so many of them that I've experienced clients who give the wrong Excel spreadsheet because they didn't know which one to provide, and it results in a violation. Same thing with binders when you have hard copy forms of, well, which one is the most up-to-date one, because they didn't trash the previous one, they gave the wrong version. So where you can get a lot of help is with those Excel spreadsheets. If you can get some kind of software that integrates and pulls those up into real time so that people aren't looking at which spreadsheet to pull up, they just go to the software, a lot better. Whiteboards are helpful, but if you can have a solution that gives task management that will go to phones, computers, with reminders to the supervisors of when something wasn't done as well, that's better than just the whiteboard. The hard copy binder might have its use, but lugging it where it needs to go or having it sitting on a shelf and no one knows when it was last updated is not as superior as a living document that people can access via their phones or their computers. Next slide. And just some case studies on examples, as we call them, tales from the trails, that Jen and I have experienced. That first one, I had a client who had a lot of deviations with their air, and they basically followed what Jen all laid out. They went through their alarms and segregated them into types. What was the cause of this one? Which control equipment was it affecting here? This and that. And once they had kind of organized all of those, they made a very reasonable approach of, okay, let's reduce these by 10% each year based on the type. And as they went through and kind of did the work each year, they found out, okay, this is how we fix this one and prevent it from happening. These ones all had the same issue, so let's identify that issue. And it resulted in a 90% reduction, far more than they were even anticipating over time. They were able to get better and better because I would argue they made it a habit. The second one highlights in my opinion, the strength of having a good quality system in your environmental. One of my clients made sure that it was very well understood, nothing came through the door without their environmental reviewing the SDS. And it wasn't just a, yep, checkbox, we have the SDS, let's put it in the pile. They looked them over. And so what occurred is that they had the same product from two different suppliers come through the door. And when they reviewed them, there were contradictory statements, even though they literally were the exact same product, just made by two different people. And so they went back to the suppliers and said, how can this be? Why are you saying this in one aspect of your SDS and saying something different? This is going to change, our reporting structure. If this is true, please advise. And the suppliers recognized that, oh, we made a mistake, and they did revise their SDSs and sent them back, and then they were allowed through. Jen?
Yeah, and a third case study that you may be familiar with, an engine manufacturer evaluated its process for applying surface coating to the undercarriage of their engines. And they were able to reduce their paint usage by half and achieve at least a half and achieve a significant reduction in the volatile organic compound emissions. It was done by looking through their process for just ways to reduce their usage of paint. If they had said, oh, it's always the way that it's always been done is to coat the entire engine, and they would have continued to use that much paint on their engine. But instead, they took a proactive view of their process and said, well, do we really have to do that way anymore? How can we, still coat the bottom and see if that works? Obviously, it takes some time to, make sure that it's still getting the desired result, at the end product. But are there places in your process that you could be looking and identifying, do we need to still make 3 coats of paint on that product, or is there something that we could reduce, or is there another product that we could be using that's less solvents? So looking holistically at your processes really helps to get some reductions and reduce those regulatory requirements. Next slide.
So I think we've hit everyone over the head. Why compliance is important and wanting to have proactive. Probably didn't need to do that with this audience, but I find this information is useful if you're needing to help persuade upper management. The data on this slide comes from EPA and NCAMP's own software that we've compiled. So if you want these sources, we can give them to you. But on the left, you can see that if you're in manufacturing, that's roughly 1/3 of all penalties in the last years coming from the manufacturing sector, which makes a lot of sense. They're usually covered by multiple regs, and they're covered by the broad part of the reg, and then they have the specialized subparts that apply to them and maybe specific stuff from their permits. So you have to be both an expert specialist and a generalist, which is very difficult. And then hopefully, if you do get an EPA inspection, in my experience, you're usually hearing back from them. If you hear nothing, everything's good. So hopefully you're hearing nothing. But if you do hear something back from EPA or a state, if you look at the data from EPA, more often than not, if you hear something back, it's not going to be a just please return to compliance letter. It's usually you're going to get a penalty or possibly go to court. Those are the larger breadth of what they're seeing when they issue those. And I'm extrapolating, but looking at this data, I would argue that what that means is that when EPA is finding things that they want to respond to, most of the time they're not finding just an administratively incomplete quick fix. They're usually finding systemic, large items that need a correction. Next slide. So Jen found this really good quote that I like. The best way to predict the future is to create it, which pretty much sums up the plan, do, check, act that she went through. Proactive is always going to be better than reactive. There's a lot of barriers, but if you plan and scope it out and make small incremental changes, it can lead you to those aspirational goals that you made aspirations that you are slowly advancing towards. And collaboration is key. I don't think you're going to find any company that just waved a magic wand and suddenly they were fully compliant and the best in environmental first class. It was a slow process that led them up to there. So the more you can look at what others have done, you can integrate them with your own processes to kind of help foster your own success. Next slide. And then NCAMP has plenty of regulatory guidance materials. If you want, we can make these available as well. Shameless plug. And I think, Jen, you're on the last slide.
Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so just a little bit more about NCAMP. We are the largest third-party Tier 2 filer in the US. It's basically because we've automated that process from start to finish. We work with our companies to get their data in the system. We actually have a system that looks like a TurboTax for Tier 2 reporting. And so we basically pull in that data to the forms, and those forms get populated. We basically file into the state portals. We send out all of the reports to the local emergency planning commissions, state, fire departments, and then pay those fees on behalf of our clients. So it's full service all the way from front to end. And we also have started implementing RCRA reporting as well, and we're building that into our application, reducing that amount of time that you need to, search through multiple vendors for your waste data information. We're consolidating that for companies into our platform. So we're hoping to reduce that time and give you some more time to work on other compliance issues at your facility. Please do feel free to ask us questions if you have any.
Thank you both. I think that was a very comprehensive, great program, what you guys are doing and the benefits for people. I did really like some of the wording, insidious, linchpin when describing non-compliant things. I think that kind of resonated with a number of us. So anybody online have questions or comments or further clarification? You can put in the message, or I believe you can unmute. Julie or Caitlin, do we see any questions? I'm not seeing any, but
I'd love to know from someone who has a long-term environmental management system, where you're finding things that have kind of either become habitual in a good way or maybe a negative way. Are there examples of times where it's kind of fallen off the tracks and you've had to regain your system, redo your system? Anybody willing to share a story with us?
I think this is Teresa with Allison. Some of what we find is where we've had people that have been in their role or their industry for so long, in doing things. And then over the last handful or so of years, we've had a lot of turnover and a lot of changes in things that, because it had always happened and it happened correctly, those weren't specifically in our EMS or other kind of mechanisms. That management of change with turnover has been a big thing that, instead of that's how we've always done it, which nobody likes that phrase, but really kind of focusing there to spend our attention and resources on.
Yeah, that's great.
I think to piggyback on that, Jen, and then should have said something while you were presenting. I've seen a lot of clients who have really strong plan, do, check, but then don't realize how important the act part of that is, and that if you're not acting on what you find, not only are you not improving and setting yourself up for failure during inspection, but you could also have a roadmap that kind of leads regulators of, well, you've documented yourself that you've had these problems and you've done nothing to improve them. So, all stages are important, but definitely anything you find, you want to go back and figure out, why did this occur? How do I prevent it from occurring and fix it?
Yeah, and I think that's especially important these days because I think there is a trend to go away from being certified in the ISO standards and just operating under the management system for your company, and not having that cost of getting certified or registered with the actual audit, the ISO auditors and so forth coming in. So I think there might be a tendency to kind of slip by on some of that stuff. And we definitely wanted to just remind you that that whole cycle is important. And we appreciate the time here today with you all. And hopefully something out of our presentation has triggered or sparked something for you to take with you today.
Thank you all.
All right. Well, yes, we very much appreciate your time and the thorough presentation and, offering your services and things. So again, the presentations will be on the page, on the webpage soon. I think the timeline's about a week or so by the time we QC and get through everything for that, but those will be there. All right. We'll we can go into the partner updates. Great. So just wanted to share some Indiana Partners for Sustainability updates. We are continuing to work through lots of energy for this full rebranding transition. It started last year, of course, working through the legalities of things and subcommittees and a number. So excited in the near future to share a number of new things. Next slide. Do want to thank the executive committee for all of the efforts they do for the quarterly meetings. We have 3 quarterly meetings and an annual conference. Information on those can be found on the webpage. And of course, Caitlin and IDEM sends out email blasts and a number of things. So hopefully gives plenty of time to make arrangements to attend for those. Also with the elected officers, if you have comments or ideas that think would be really helpful for you as a partner, potential partner, or other partners, please feel free to reach out to us because we want to make sure that these meetings are value added, really good information for us all to continue sustainability and pollution prevention in our organizations. So do want to again thank the members. We do have openings. 2 openings in the conference we had announced, and we're working through those. But if there's an interest, you can reach out to me directly. And thankful we have 91 current membership for that. We do have several applications under review with Caitlin in the full-time role, working through the processes and hoping to be making an announcement soon. Any time of the year, if you or somebody we know would be a good member, they could reach out. We can help walk you through that process for that. There's no cost to that, of course. It's a commitment to attend at least 2 of the either 3 quarterly or the 1 conference for that to meet that need. Applications are here. They also could be found on the webpage for there. Like I said, membership is free and voluntary. The Partners Pledge, like I talked about, and it's meeting the standard of environmental compliance. So I think that's probably one of the lengthier parts of the process is the review and whatnot for that. And then there's an annual partner and APR that's due annually, which will be coming up in this next quarter. It's also good for networking. We have a LinkedIn group. We're wanting to grow that in the future. So there's more information. You join it. Also share what you've done, right, with your group or groups for sustainability on there. Also have a Twitter page. I guess it's X now, if you would like to engage in that. Also how to increase inviting business colleagues or other companies to attend. Again, it's free and it's members and non-members and potential members. So always welcome for other insights and people to participate. And then distributing partners materials at conferences. So we it's still the Partners for Pollution Prevention. This is one of the things we're still working through to upgrade, hoping to have more electronic versions to share. But please follow the link to see more information there. Happy to share save the dates. There'll be information sent out. So in the spring, we're still working on the final date. Our friends at AstraZeneca is going to host, they're in Mount Vernon, host a quarterly meeting. So I think we'll have lots of updates on some pretty exciting sustainability things that they've done or are still doing there for it. Our summer Q2 is still in process. We're in the works on a few things to get that. So we'll hope to have that communicated pretty quickly. We have confirmed September 17th. We're back to a Wednesday this year. A number of people had shared that they liked the Wednesday date, that 3rd week of the month. Will be our 28th annual P2 conference. We are going to still have it at the Indianapolis Marriott North. And per request in December, a year from now, we are planning for another virtual, a number of feedback, the busy time of this quarter and also unpredictable weather. People really enjoyed the virtual aspect for that. So any comments or thoughts on that, feel free to reach out to me or the group on that. But we want to keep moving and have lots of good speakers and content for everybody. Okay. I do want to thank everybody for being here today and doing those, participating. We did have over 100 register. We've had up to 78 logged in so far this morning. I see we still have almost everybody still here. We're going to do a short break and start back right at 11:15 with our item regulatory updates. And I know there's been lots of new changes and things coming up. So I think there's a really good content to have the 4 different item branch chiefs and section chiefs to share on there. Appreciate it. I'll see everybody back at 11:15.
Okay, it is 11:15, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started again. Welcome back. We just wanted a quick reminder, please keep your microphones and your cameras muted until Q&A sessions at that point. I want to say thank you to the earlier speakers. I think that there was a lot of good content shared and definitely learning a lot today. Sorry about that. Next up, we're going to hear from some IDEM leadership. We have 4 IDEM speakers today. We'll have a small Q&A at the end of each of their presentations, so please hold your questions until the individual speaker is done. A reminder, these presentations will be posted in the next few days to IDEM's website. So I'd like to first introduce Lori Freeman. Lori is the Chief of Compliance, the Compliance Branch in the Office of Land Quality at IDEM. She has over 15 years of experience in compliance and enforcement issues pertaining to solid and hazardous waste. In addition, she advises on waste classifications and/or waste determination issues, legitimate use of solid waste, and assists in rule development. She's also U.S. EPA accredited PCB inspector. She holds a Master's of Science degree in Environmental Science from Indiana University and a Bachelor of Science degree in Biology from Purdue University. Lori, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my PowerPoint presentation. Thank you, Caitlin, for that lovely introduction. So I'm going to be talking about solid and hazardous waste issues today. Primarily, the PowerPoint presentation focuses on hazardous waste issues, but I can address any questions you might have on solid waste issues as well. So some of the topics that I'm going to cover today is the generator improvement rules, technical corrections, PFAS, contained indeterminations, episodic generation events, and identifying and marking hazards on hazardous waste containers. So the EPA has completed a number of technical corrections addressing issues within the generator improvement rule and the definition of solid waste. IDEM has not yet adopted these technical corrections. That is a future project for us, but I do not have a date for you yet on when those will be incorporated into our rules. With PFAS, the EPA is planning on making PFAS a hazardous waste. At least that is the current information that I have. It has not happened yet. If it does happen, it will most likely be a listed hazardous waste. I don't really have a lot of details on this at this particular juncture in time, but PFAS does remain a solid waste in the meantime. So if you were to have a release or something like that, you would have to handle it as a hazardous waste and dispose of that material appropriately. Episodic generation of hazardous waste. So this is something that might be very important to anybody who is a very small quantity generator or a small quantity generator of hazardous waste. We don't have any changes to the policy. There is some guidance that is available from IDEM out on our website that explains the general criteria of the episodic generation, but basically, you have 2 options. You can either have a planned episodic event or a unplanned episodic event. And these are events that would kick you up from a small quantity generator or a very small quantity generator into the large quantity generator status. You are allowed to have 1 of these events per year. If you are planning a planned event, then you would need to notify IDEM 30 days before the planned event, and all work has to be completed within 60 days of the first generation of that waste. If you are doing an unplanned event, you have to notify IDEM within 72 hours of that unplanned event, and then you would also still have that 60 days to get the material off-site of when the material was first generated. If you go beyond that time frame, then you will be kicked up into that large quantity generator status. If you do not submit the notifications in the appropriate timeframes, you would also be in the large quantity generator status category. You can petition IDEM for a second event if you would like to during the year, but it needs to be the opposite of the type that you've already applied for. So if you had one planned event this year, you can petition IDEM for an unplanned event. And if you've had an unplanned event, you can petition IDEM for a planned event. There are no extensions to the timeframes in the rules, so you need to make sure you meet those timeframes and keep those dates in mind. The next topic is one that has been an issue this past year, and that is making sure that hazardous waste containers and tanks are marked with the appropriate information on those tanks. So in addition to the words hazardous waste, you also need the data, the date of accumulation, the start date of the accumulation. You also need to indicate what the hazards are. And this is not a single hazard, it is all applicable hazards for that waste. So we've had a lot of people who just put what they consider to be the primary hazard on their tanks, and that is not sufficient. You need to have all of the indications of hazards, because in the event of an emergency or something like that, you need to know what possible outcomes there could be with each container. Another issue that we often see is that people leave the DOT indication of hazard on the tank, on their tank or container, and assume that placard is going to be sufficient. It is not. The DOT regulations and the RCRA regulations are separate regulations. The DOT placarding is for while in transport, and the RCRA regulations are for while in storage. So you do need to make sure that you're complying with both RCRA regulations and, in the event that you're transporting it, DOT regulations. And that can sometimes lead to additional labeling or marking on the containers. I didn't put up a slide for the contained ends, but if you have a listed hazardous waste in some soil on your property, you can potentially get that contained out so you can send it for disposal in a solid waste landfill. That requires sending in a notice to IDEM. That policy has a form that you would fill out. You would sample the soil or the groundwater. This policy only applies to environmental media. If it meets the exit criteria in the policy, then you would submit that application to IDEM. IDEM would review it and either issue you an approval or a denial based upon the information that you submitted to us. And that is a way that you can send your listed what would otherwise be a listed hazardous waste to a solid waste landfill. But again, it only applies to environmental media such as soil and groundwater. I can also address any questions you might have on legitimate use or beneficial use of waste, solid waste, or any other solid waste issues you might have. But my presentation did focus on hazardous waste issues. So that's all I have in the presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Hi, Lori. This is Teresa. With so many of the potential or to come, where could we go to maybe be able to see where there's updates or statuses for those?
So we do to try to post that on our website. If you want to keep on top of regulations that are being issued by IDEM, you can check our website for the Environmental Rules Board. All of the rules that IDEM promulgates will be presented to the board for preliminary and then final adoption. And those will all be on that website. I can provide that website's address to Caitlin so that she can send it out to the group if that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. I think a lot of people are very interested in the up and coming and the potentials for that. So having a place to go and check that out would be a good thing.
Sure, I can get that information to Caitlin. And in fact, we're having an Environmental Rules Board meeting this afternoon where there will be a delisting finally adopted, CCR preliminary adopted, and regulations on waste tires as well. That'll be up for adoption.
Perfect. Thank you, Lori. It was very good.
No problem. Any other questions?
Hi, Lori. We have a question from Byron Lean. Our hazardous waste transporter also allows hazardous waste in quotes and DOT labels. Other labels, i.e. RCRA, are removed. Any recommendations on how do we address this?
That is, so while in transport, only DOT labels are required. And so what your hazardous waste transporter allows, that's kind of up to a business decision for them. I will fully admit that I'm not fully versed on all of the hazardous waste transporter regulations, and I can direct you to our section chief for hazardous waste compliance, and she can answer any additional questions about the regulations for hazardous waste transporters. All I can really encourage you is that if you are storing any waste at your site, that you make sure that those labels are on there up until those containers are put onto a transport unit, because that is your responsibility as a generator of waste to make sure that the labels are correct on your property. Once it's loaded up onto the transporter's truck, then it's going to be their responsibility until they get it to the final destination. And then at that final destination site, the TSD is going to have to make sure that those labels are also correct on those drums. And that's going to be their responsibility. Does that help?
Thank you, Lori. We have another question about DOT labels. Do DOT labels other than Class 9 remain acceptable for indicating hazards of hazardous waste during accumulation?
They can't. I'm not going to say they can't, but what I do encourage you to do is make sure that whatever label that you are using to indicate the hazards indicates all of the hazards. And I think that is often the problem when you're dealing with a DOT label. They are worried about what could go wrong in transport, and we are worried about what could go wrong while storing it for a longer period of time. Transportation is typically a shorter window, and so. For example, a waste could be both a toxic and a corrosive. And so you would need to know that, and both of those would need to be indicated on the label while stored at your facility. And again, I'm not an expert on DOT labels, so I'm not sure what all the DOT regulations are. And so I don't know if the other labels have those multiple indications of hazards on them, but you need to make sure that while it's at your facility, that all of the hazards are indicated, not just a single hazard.
Okay, we have another question from Derek. He asks, an indication of the hazards of the contents. Examples include, but are not limited to, the applicable hazardous waste characteristics, i.e. ignitable, corrosive, reactive, toxic, hazardous communication consistent with the Department of Transportation requirements at 49 CFR Part 172. Wait a minute, is this a question or just a comment? I think he might just be responding. I don't think that's actually a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that is true. What you need to do for RCRA is label it with the waste characteristics. So ignitable, corrosive, reactive. Those are types of things that are acceptable. You also need to make sure that all of them are listed if they are appropriate to that waste stream. Oh, and they've already got the information for the Environmental Rules Board meeting. So that's helpful. Any other questions that I can help with?
Okay. If there are no further questions, then thank you, Lori. That was wonderful, and I'm sure very helpful to a lot of us here in this meeting. So we appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I enjoyed presenting to you guys. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Next, we are going to move on to our next speaker from IDEM. Next, we have Matt Prater. Matt Prater is a branch chief for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management Drinking Water Branch and has worked for IDEM since 2011. Work duties at IDEM include helping staff implement the Safe Drinking Water Act regulations, assisting public water system owners and operators, responding to media questions, responding to emergency events, and working on sampling projects. Matt graduated from Ball State University in 2009 with a Bachelor's of Science in Natural Resources and Environmental Management and a minor in chemistry. He also received a Master of Business Administration from Bellevue University in 2013. I will let you, Matt, take it away from here. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Caitlin, for that introduction. Let me share my presentation here. Are you able to see my slide okay?
Yes, it looks good.
All right, great. Thank you. Yeah, so like Caitlin said, I'm Matt Prater. I'm IDEM's Drinking Water Branch Chief. I'm going to provide an update for everyone on the PFAS regulation that was introduced this year, finalized from EPA. They actually established MCLs, maximum contaminant levels, for the different types of PFAS for drinking water. That was on April 26th is when they finalized this rule. EPA set the MCL at 4 parts per trillion for PFOA and PFOS, and then an MCL of 10 parts per trillion for the other PFAS listed at that last bullet there, PFNA, PFHXS, and the other one known as GenX. These are pretty low levels. The lab detection limit is actually at 2 parts per trillion. So as you can see here, any detect could possibly trigger a system to have an MCL issue. And so getting into the timeline with the implementation of this rule, within 3 years, starting this year, the initial monitoring will have to be completed by April of 2027. So what that means is for all the community water systems and non-transient, non-community water systems, which includes like schools, daycares, office buildings, or the non-transient type systems, we'll have to complete that initial PFAS monitoring. And then based on those results, our staff here at IDEM will set the compliance monitoring schedule going forward. A system could be on quarterly monitoring. Once every calendar quarter, we have to monitor for PFAS, or if the results were okay, no detects in the initial monitoring, the system could qualify for monitoring once every 3 years. And again, IDEM will be setting those sample schedules and be notifying systems what those schedules will be looking like for the future. And then EPA set a deadline of in April 2029 to comply with the MCL. So that does give systems some time. If there are any exceedances above the MCL, that they will have time to install treatment or look at alternative sources of water that are not contaminated with PFAS, so they can have plenty of time to comply with that the MCL, so we don't have to worry about issuing those MCL violations. The next slide here, it just gives you a table overview of the different MCL set for the PFAS. There, for the first time in a drinking water rule, EPA set a hazard index level, so that's combining these 4 different types of PFAS on that bottom row. And what that is a compliance determined by a running annual average at each sampling point. The samples are collected at the entry point to the system. So after all treatment is where those samples are collected. Getting into just some details on how this hazard index works, since this is, like I said, the first time it's been used in the drinking water world. It's calculated by adding the ratio of the water sample concentration to the health-based water concentration. So you take your PFAS result and divide it by that health-based water concentration to get your ratio. You add up those 4 ratios. If it's above 1, then it would be a violation of the MCL. And then we're looking for below 1 after you add that up to make sure it's below that hazard index level that was set. And then, of course, we'll be calculating those results for systems as that data comes in. But if you are interested in how that will work, there are plenty of EPA fact sheets on how the running annual average is calculated. Another item I want to go over for this presentation is our PFAS sampling initiative that we took off with back in July of 2020 is when we applied for the Emerging Contaminant Grant. Sampling started in 2021. We knew there was something in the works of a PFAS drinking water rule being released. So the commissioner at the time wanted us to start a voluntary sampling project for all community water systems throughout the state. Like I said, we applied for the Emerging Contaminants Grant from EPA, and then thanks to Indiana Finance Authority, IFA provided the match. So we were able to get that funding secured for the sampling project. Started in March of 2021, we focused on the medium-sized systems first, that population 3,300 to 10,000. And then from there, we went on to the smaller systems, trying to encourage systems to participate on the sampling. And then from there, we went to the large systems for our final phase 3 for this portion of the sampling project, which finished up in June of 2024. So getting into what we saw from the data from this sampling, on our first phase with the medium-sized systems, we had 59 systems participate, and then 6 of those systems did report finished water results above the PFAS MCLs that I just spoke about earlier. And then for the second phase, the small size systems, we actually had a really good turnout for 339 systems participated. And out of those systems, 4 reported finished water results above the MCL. And then for phase 3, for the large size systems, we had 69 systems participate, and then 6 systems reported results above the MCL. Do want to note for the systems that did report results above the MCL in their finished water, the majority of those systems were able to turn off a well or identify the contributing source and isolate that so it would not cause them to be above the MCL. So that was good. There are still some systems that unfortunately they could not afford to take their well offline. So they are looking at installing treatment or actually looking at developing a new well field. A fourth phase that we added to this project is sampling at the surface water intakes for all of our surface water systems. We have about 30 surface water systems throughout the state. And we just finished up the sampling portion of the project, and we had 3 of the surface water systems reported the raw untreated water results above the MCL. So this is samples actually being collected in the river or lake where they're getting their drinking water from before any treatment. And then just listing out the treatment technologies, the go-to treatment for systems with PFAS MCLs is activated carbon, ion exchange treatment, and high pressure membrane filtration. Depending on the type of PFAS too, is something to look at which treatment technology will work best. There are some systems exploring some pilot treatment technologies, and our engineers are available to help provide input on what those pilot treatment projects should look like. And then, of course, there's a lot of funding out there right now nationwide for addressing this PFAS emerging contaminant. SRF, Indiana Finance Authority, the SRF is the state revolving fund, and Indiana Finance Authority is responsible for managing those dollars. And they are able to loan out that funding to various communities that need to address the PFAS issues. And then all of our results from our PFAS sampling project are posted on our IDEM website, listed here on the first bullet point. And then also just added a couple other resources if anyone's interested in those links. And then finally, my contact information, and open up to any questions now.
Thanks, Matt. I think that was definitely has been a hot topic for a number of years, and then having some of those in. Of the 50 states, how many of how many of the other states are adopting the PFAS, and are they similar to what we're seeing in Indiana?
Yeah, with it being a federal regulation for states to have primacy of the Safe Drinking Water Act, they will have to adopt the new PFAS MCL. So I expect 100% of the states will be adopting those that PFAS MCL. Now, some states, they did actually create their own rule before this federal rule was released, and their MCLs were actually set higher. So that will be difficult for them to make some adjustments there.
Hey, Matt, I do have one question as far as the drinking water facilities testing for PFAS. Is this going to be like a month? I mean, I know we don't know right now, but is this going to be like a monthly test, a semi-annual, quarterly test, or an annual test for their drinking water? Because I know to get the results as of right now, it takes about 2 weeks per sample. So do you know if they've been able to speed that process up to make it more efficient for the drinking water folks?
As far as the lab analysis and the results, that's the time frame which you mentioned, 2 weeks to get those results, and that's what we saw from our sampling project. I would expect with the number of systems having to start sampling and to help with the lab capacity issue, that will be sped up here when it starts taking off more with this initial monitoring. Your question about how often the systems will have to sample, it all depends on if they are a surface water system, meaning they get their source of drinking water from like a lake or river. Those systems will be on quarterly monitoring starting out to see what those results are. And then also we're looking at the population size for the systems too. If they're below 10,000 population and they're a groundwater system, we're looking at 2 samples per year. And then depending on those results, that system could be reduced to once every 3 years. So it just depends on the situation for the source water type and the population is what we look at for monitoring frequency.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Matt? All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
And we thank you for being here.
Great, thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Kim Rohr. Let me just pull that up. Kim is the section chief of the wastewater inspections and wastewater operations certification. She has been with IDEM for 10 years. She also has 10 years experience working for wastewater utilities. She is class 4 and class D she has class 4 and class D wastewater licenses. Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay. So we don't have a lot of new stuff going on in wastewater right now. So I'm just kind of going to go over some reminders and some frequently asked questions we get. And then if you guys have questions at the end about anything, you can ask me. So operator certification is what we usually get the most questions on. So I want to remind people that if you are applying to have a course approved for credit, we would like you to submit that to us as soon as possible, but at least 60 days prior to a class. We have operators that may think that you're going to give them technical credit for a class and then come to find out that it's just general credit, and then they get kind of upset. So it's best if you get it approved for us before you start advertising it. After an operator takes a class, he or she has 90 days to submit that to our office for credits. Sometimes the operators will think that the provider is going to do the submittal for them. So the operator really needs to keep an eye on our website to make sure that their hours are updated. And we update the credit hours only once a month. So if you submit for credit like at the end of the month, like the 30th or 31st, I wouldn't expect it to be on our website the following month. It probably would take 2 months before it shows up. You can always contact us to ask us if we have received it to make sure you don't go over that 90 days. Operators can't get credit for taking the same class twice in a 3-year renewal period. So if you took, say, Lagoon Maintenance 101 from Tom Smith, each course is given an approval number. You wouldn't be able to take that same exact course 2 or 3 times in a renewal period. It kind of defeats the purpose of continuing education. And we just like to remind people that you can continue to get your contact hours 1 year after your license expires before you have to sit again for the exam. But during that 1 year period, you would not be able to sign for any plants until you get your renewal. So we get a lot of complaints about why does it take so long for my application for an operator exam? So we ask people to make sure they're completely filling out all sections of the application and making sure that all their experience is under certified operator and that they give the certified operator's name so that we can contact them if we have questions. We have one person doing all applications, so and she's pretty on top of it. But she does need you to complete the application fully. And if she sends out an email to you asking for follow-up information, the sooner you get that back to us, the sooner we can approve the application. So last time I met with an environmental group, they asked us, why can we not pay via credit card? We are tired of paying with checks. Checks take too long. And we have worked with the people that provide on the online payment portal for permits. And we will be able to accept payment via online now. Before you had to call in and we'd give you a phone number, and sometimes somebody would answer the phone, sometimes they wouldn't answer the phone. So it was not very fun to do. So now we have a website that you can access to make payment. It's not the primary option yet because we are pretty much piggybacking on permits and you're paying through the permit portal, but we are working with the online portal people to get operator certification in the drop-down menu. So currently you will have to email or call Rebecca McMonigal first. Her contact information will be at the end of my presentation. And she will give you the instructions on how to pay online and make sure that she knows that it's coming so that we know that there is a payment that we should be expecting from the permit portal. And then once you make a payment, you'll get a receipt and you would send your completed application and the receipt to Rebecca, and she can immediately begin processing that application at that time. Whereas if you send a check, we do have to wait for the check to clear, and the check doesn't come through our office, it goes through another office. So it does take 2 or 3 weeks if you do pay by check. Some other frequently asked questions, especially in industries that we get, is if a certified operator is leaving, they want to know, what am I supposed to do? So we would like to know that if you are leaving. And so if you could send us an email to www.reports@idem.in.gov, and that's our general email inbox. So if you have any correspondence and you don't know who to contact or who to send a question to or ask about something, that is the email address that you should send it to. And the person that monitors that will find the correct person to answer your questions. Let us know when your last day will be. And if you would be so kind to inform the permittee that they must submit a notice of change of operator within 30 days. They cannot be without an operator for 30 days. They must immediately have an operator or they're in violation, but they do have 30 days to let us know who their new operator will be. And we have a notice of change available on our website that has all the information that we need. So we also have, specifically at industries, we have operators that leave quickly and the industry is like, what am I supposed to do now? If you have someone on site that has education experience, but they're just not quite ready to take the exam and they need time to study, we can give that person a provisional license, which means that they have the required experience and education to sit, they just want time to study. A provisional certificate can only be granted if an operator left quickly. If you know in advance that your operator is retiring or that, the operator gave you a couple months notice, we really don't grant provisional certifications. But if you had an operator give you 2 weeks notice or they retired really quickly, we do offer provisional certificates. In general, we grant them for only 90 days. In certain situations, we can grant them up to a year. And a person with a provisional certificate can only sign as a certified operator of that specific facility. They cannot sign for any other facilities. And the person that, the facility and the person that is going to be granted the provisional must both be in contact with us. We want to make sure that they are going to take the exam and it's not just somebody saying this person's going to do it and they have no intention of ever taking the exam. If you don't have anybody on site, that has experience or education. One option would be to hire a temporary contract operator. Recently, I created 2 lists that are available on our website. There's a sanitary operator list and an industrial operator list. And these are operators that have let me know that they are willing to take on additional facilities. And if you're an operator and want to be on that list, you can send me your information and I can add you to it. Recently, rarely, but recently I've been sending a couple of mass emails for any updates that we're trying to let operators aware of. Our mass emails do look like spam. So I like to let people know that they're not spam. It does say my email, but then it says no reply at everbridge.net, and it has a link for people to click. So it totally looks like spam. I have no problem with people calling me to verify that it is legit. Plenty of people have done that, but we are using this as a way to get announcements out. But we do it rarely because I don't want people to not read them when they do come out. NetDMR. So we have Rose McDaniel retired, and she used to walk people by hand through signing up for NetDMR whenever they changed operators or changed signatories. We really don't have a person that does that anymore. We have detailed instructions, and we ask that you please at least attempt to read the instructions, do it by yourself before you call and try to have somebody walk you through it. And I just like to remind people that in general, if you're requesting access to a permit, chances are you can't self-authorize. The responsible official has to sign the subscriber agreement as well. We have people ask us, what do we do when we get an unsatisfactory inspection report? They get upset about how do we respond to these. They think they have to pay a consultant $1,000 to send us a simple response for simple issues that needed addressed. You do not have to hire a consultant or engineer to do your response. The certified operator can respond, but it must be on company letterhead, and we need the responsible official seat so we know that they are aware of the issues and what needs to be done. We just want to know what has been done. If the issue's already been fixed, all you have to do is say, hey, this is what the violation was, this is what we did to fix it, and it's fixed. If it's going to take a few months or maybe even years to fix it, we need an estimate of when you expect to be back into compliance. And you can send those to WW violation response, which is on the inspection report. If you accidentally send it to WW reports, that's fine. Well, it'll get to the right place. And I do like to remind people that WW stands for wastewater. It is not World Wide Web. There is only 2 Ws. We get a lot of people that say that they have their emails bouncing back, and it's because they put 3 Ws instead of 2. We do, as I mentioned, WW reports at idem.in.gov is our general inbox. We have one person that receives those, and she distributes to everybody. So when you do send something to that email, if you could include your permit, that'd be awesome, because everything we do involves permit numbers, and if you don't give it to us, we have to look it up. And I included some contact information. So there's mine, and then for contact hours and operator license renewals, it's Tanya Fuller White. If you have questions on the application or the exam, it's Rebecca McMonable. And then I have some other people listed there. And again, WW reports at idem.in.gov for any correspondence or questions that you have that you don't know who to send to. Do we have any questions? Bob?
Yes, Kim, when you mentioned the mass email, I received a couple of those and advised my clients that it could be spam because it had that one line item that says click here to acknowledge receipt.
Yes.
And so I thought maybe you could remove that.
I would love to. I have asked about it, and maybe Matt Prater might be able to speak to that a little bit better, because we actually utilize the company that they have. But I think that the reason that it's on there is because the company wants to verify that a certain number of people are receiving the emails. So they have this link, and if you click it, then they know that you received the email. But we can certainly ask them if it's possible to remove it.
I just think it raises a red flag.
Oh, it sure does.
Hey, Kim, I want to thank you for having a way to be able to pay for your wastewater operator's certification test by credit card. It's going to speed things up so much. I mean, it was really cumbersome whether you paid by check or you had to call in for credit cards. So this is really a step in the right direction. I want to thank you for taking the effort to get that taken care of.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
Okay, if there aren't any further questions for Kim, we thank you for your time and we appreciate you being here. Okay.
Thank you.
If Matt is still with us, there was a late submission question for Matt. I'm not sure if you saw that, but we do have a bit of time if you're able to, Matt. Well, maybe not. We will get him to answer that question for you. But next we have Randy Brown. Randy, let me just organize my thoughts here. Randy received his Bachelor of Science degree from Purdue University in May of 1980. During his first 7 years, beginning in 1980, Randy worked for the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Division of Soil Conservation on Indiana's Accelerated Soil Survey Program, followed by administering the DNR Stormwater and Sediment Control Program until 2005. In 2005, Randy accepted a position of Stormwater Program Manager with IDEM. Randy is currently the section chief for the Stormwater Program. Randy is a certified professional in erosion and sediment control and a certified professional in municipal stormwater management through EnviroCert International. Randy, I will go ahead and turn it over to you. Okay. It doesn't look like it's working. So Randy, I'll go ahead and I'll just share your presentation off of my screen and you can just let me know when you want the slide to advance, okay?
I just hit another button. Is it working now?
We got it.
Got it? Okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Took a little bit, but what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the stormwater program. Specifically, can you see the slide for general permit conversion process?
No.
Okay. Now you can see it.
Yes.
Okay. We've been going through a process of converting all our general permits that were through Indiana Administrative Code to master general permits. We have 3 programs within stormwater, construction stormwater, municipal separate storm sewer systems. Those 2 administrative codes were changed over to master general permits in December of 2021. The last program we have in stormwater is the industrial stormwater general permit program. So we're in the process right now. It just went off public notice a few weeks ago. So we're in the process right now of reviewing comments that we received on that permit. But what I'd like to do today is just go through some of the changes that we're going to see on this permit. So the permit's based on SIC codes to determine eligibility for. It was done that way for Rule 6. What we're going to do under the ISGP, which is based on the multi-sector general permit that EPA has issued over the last 10 years or so, it's going to still be based on SIC codes, but those SIC codes are tied to sectors that industries belong to. In the new permit, there are 29 sectors. So there are multiple SIC codes attached to each of those sectors. Permit coverage, we're still going to use a notice of intent to obtain permit coverage. The stormwater pollution prevention plan, the multi-sector general permit had a provision where each sector had different plan requirements. And what we've done through our development of the industrial stormwater general permit is come up with a plan that would apply across all sectors. So not every sector wouldn't have to have additional items in their plans. So it should make it simpler for compliance for everybody. The ISGP is what we refer to it as, has specific performance standards. For example, where a facility can reduce exposure, we would encourage that. There still is no exposure exclusion in this permit. So if a facility can achieve limiting all their industrial activities, the exposure to rain and storm, rain and snow melt, then they could possibly qualify for the no exposure exclusion. Basically, on-site operations perform good housekeeping measures on-site, including like trash containers, storage areas, loading docks, basically manage those activities. And then ensure long-term functionality of any measures that you have at the facility. The ISG, the performance standards, looking at erosion and sediment control would be one of the items that a facility should try to eliminate or manage on the facility. If there's an expansion of a facility or something like that, the facility possibly would be required to get a construction stormwater general permit. Some of the other provisions, how do you manage your stormwater runoff at the facility? Optimize the effectiveness of your control measures using such things as diversions and different types of practices to manage your stormwater. And then just looking at things like how do you manage salt, if that's one of the items that you actually have as part of your industrial operations. Any kind of dust generation, vehicle tracking onto public roads, any kind of discharge of waste, garbage, floatable debris. You should have that as part of your requirements and part of your performance standards to try to meet. Having trouble with my slide set here. Hey, Caitlin, I'm having trouble advancing these slides.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think I'm back on track. Sorry about that. Part of just like with Rule 6, there is still an employee education program. The annual training, which requires annual training for all employees. The training that would be required for people working at the facility would be based more on their job responsibilities. And not everybody necessarily at a facility would necessarily have to go through the same training. So a facility can target that training to an individual that is doing specific tasks at the facility. There is what we call a stormwater pollution prevention team. So that person or persons can actually develop those training programs to guide that process. That person also, or those individuals, would more than likely have to have more in-depth training than, say, somebody that's doing delivery of materials or operating a forklift at the facility. So that training can be targeted at that person. Training has to look at operation and maintenance of stormwater measures. How is the facility stormwater pollution prevention plan implemented? Monitoring procedures, who's over those types of activities? Once again, material handling, are there specific people at the facility that do material handling? And then all the training has to be documented. Data training, name of the trainer, affiliation, and individual trained, what's the curriculum associated with that facility or with that program. And then probably the biggest change we're going to see in the permit, Rule 6 had annual sampling of stormwater. You basically had to sample for 8 parameters once a year. The new permit, as I said, is based on the multi-sector general permit. We have looked at other states in the Midwest to come up with the benchmark monitoring. And basically, the ISGP requires sampling. We're going to require sampling of pH, COD, total suspended solids for all sectors in the permit. And then any parameter that is specific to your sector would have to be added to your sampling list of sampling parameters that you sample at the facility. And so the sampling changes during the first 8 quarterly monitoring periods, basically the first 2 years of the permit coverage. The permittee must perform benchmark monitoring in 4 of the 8 quarterly monitoring periods, and those have to be consecutive. So and just to keep in mind, a benchmark exceedance is not a permit violation. Failure to implement corrective action as a result of benchmark exceedances would be the violation. So example, if you're continuing to exceed your benchmarks, and you would have to look at corrective actions that you would be in place to bring those numbers down. So we're not looking at the benchmark exceedance as a violation. We're looking at the fact that a facility might not take the corrective actions necessary to bring those numbers down. And once you obtain your 4 quarterly samples, you would take an average to determine if you've exceeded the benchmarks or not. In addition to benchmark monitoring, which is what most of the sectors will fall under, there are roughly 10 sectors or activities associated with a sector that require effluent limitation monitoring requirements. The effluent limitations are assigned to facilities based on the sectors, and an exceedance of a effluent limitation will require the facility to implement stormwater measures and operational controls to address the pollutant, including updating the stormwater pollution prevention plan and filing exceedance report. And in this situation, an exceedance actually is a violation. So that's the difference between a benchmark and effluent limitation. Now, for example, the 10, I think airports would be under that, but an airport will have benchmarks. But if an airport does de-icing, they would not only have benchmarks, but for the de-icing operation, if they did it that year, would also have an effluent limitation assigned to that facility. And then the permit requires quarterly inspections to look at runoff conveyances. Has to be done by a qualified personnel. Basically, that's somebody that has some training in stormwater management, and some of this can be achieved through the training program that is associated with the facility. And at least one of those quarterly inspections has to be conducted during a rain event. And then there's also quarterly visual assessment of stormwater discharge from each outfall. This is basically occurs during a discharge. You may not be sampling, but you're required to take a visual sample in a container, do a visual assessment of that, look for unique characteristics such as color, odor, or anything that may be a red flag that there may be a problem. And then part of the permit we're going to be requiring, and this is an EPA requirement, that all applications are submitted electronically through a portal. This includes notices of intents, exclusions, discharge monitoring reports, and no exposure applications. Now, we do have a regulatory service portal. It is being used it's not very being used robust at this time. We are gearing up to roll that out to all permittees. We have people signing up for it right now. But your NOIs, when the permit becomes effective, we'll have to go through that process and submit online through our regulatory services portal. We are looking at annual reports that those are not going to be submitted. They're going to have to be retained on site. So that is one change from Rule 6. We're not going to require those to be submitted, but they should be readily available. At least that's how it's written in the current permit. And then discharge monitoring reports would have to be used through NetDMR. So everybody will have to sign up for the regulatory services portal, and in addition to sign up for NetDMR. So facility representatives will have to go through both processes to get signed up to use those systems. There's the link to the regulatory services portal. And as I said, this is where all the applications will be going through. And then just open it up to questions.
Okay, Randy, we have several questions for you. The first one is from Jason. He asks, do you know when PFAS sampling will be added to stormwater monitoring requirements?
We actually, after the permit was finalized and we got the final approval from EPA, that PFAS issue came up and we made a decision that we are not going to add it at this time. So unless somebody requires us to put it in, that probably will not appear in the industrial stormwater general permit until probably the next time we renew that permit, which will be 5 years after we issue this one. So we'll take it into consideration at that time.
Okay, thank you, Randy. The next question is from Bob. He asks, will all current permittees be rolled over in the ISGP at the same time, such that the benchmark monitoring schedule, first 8 quarters, be the same for all?
We have about 1,200 permittees. Our objective would be to try to roll everybody over at the same time. It may be a little bit of a exercise that, to do that, but the goal would be to get everybody in at the same time and have everybody set up on the same quarters so they can move forward and be on the same schedule, especially say a facility like one facility, a company that has multiple facilities will definitely try to make sure that happens. But yeah, the goal would be to move everybody over at the same time. And then everybody's going to have to file a new notice of intent also when we go live with the new permit.
Okay, so we've got several questions we need to rattle off here pretty quick.
Yeah.
So Derek asks, when is this expected to be passed and facilities obtain and meet permit requirements? By this, I'm not sure what he means, but hopefully you do.
We are in the process right now reviewing comments. We will, if there are major changes, we'll have to go back to EPA. We also have to time the issuance of this permit with basically revoking or rescinding Rule 6. So those two operations have to happen at the same time. So I can't give a definite date when this is going to happen. It'll be in 2025, but at this time, I don't have a definite, even a target date that this might happen.
Okay, great. Tanya asks, if our permit under Rule 6 expired in 2024 and we submitted an NOI, do we need to submit a new NOI when the new permit is available? And we have more questions, I think. So
yes, you would have to submit a new NOI just because of the changes.
Okay, Laura asks, if you have an NPDES permit, will the ISGP affect you?
I assume they're meaning that they have a individual permit through the wastewater section that it has stormwater components. it should not affect you if that's the situation or that's what is being asked. This would only be if you had a Rule 6 permit.
Okay, and the last question up right now is Anil asks, is there any flexibility built in the sampling criteria for ISGP, current sampling conditions of 72-hour dry period, 0.1 inch flow within a 30-minute of the event makes it challenging to collect samples at the outfall?
The 72 and the 30-minute is still in this permit. The rainfall amount or you have to have a certain rainfall amount is no longer in this permit. It's based on when there is a discharge at the facility. So it's not based on a rainfall event. It's based on a certain rainfall event. It's based on when a discharge occurs at the facility at the outfall.
Okay, Teresa, we can see your screen, but we can't hear you.
Fair, thank you. I was just reiterating, thank you very much for all of the presenters, for IDEM and everybody taking the time to attend and join. If there's additional questions, we'll get those distributed and answered and get the presentations up on the webpage as soon as we're able. But most importantly, we do appreciate the continued support and looking forward to seeing you at our next quarterly meeting. Information should be coming soon after the holidays for there. A reminder on some upcoming events, we'll have those communicated via email and posting, etc. And then the last slide, we do have a survey. If you could take a moment to fill that out. The evaluation for today, I know we had a couple technical things in a couple spots, so we appreciate the patience for that. But mostly like on content, things you'd like to see, things you'd like improved, etc. If you could share that, we'd greatly appreciate it. Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day and great holidays. See you soon.